They said humanity had vanished. That Earth had fallen silent long ago. In the archives of the Galactic Council, humanity was a cautionary tale, a species that burned too bright, too fast. A civilization that reached the stars, fought its wars, and then simply disappeared. For 500,000 years, the galaxy moved on. Empires rose and fell. Borders shifted like sand. Planets were consumed, reborn, and conquered again. And in that endless tide of history, humanity became a myth. But myths have a way of watching. And waiting. The Sarah Empire ruled what was left of known space, proud, ancient, and certain that no one could challenge their dominion. Their fleets were vast, their technology unmatched, and their archive stretched across 1,000 worlds. To them, peace was simply the absence of rebellion. And order was maintained through fear. When they spoke of peace, they meant submission. But there were whispers, even among the highborn of the empire. Whispers of strange signals buried beneath old frequencies. Of ghost transmissions from coordinates long erased from star maps. Of machines orbiting a dead world in a forgotten system. The old name of that system was Soul. The empire's historians laughed. They said humanity had been gone for 500,000 years, extinct, assimilated, erased. After all, peace had reigned for millennia. No one had the will to fight anymore. But peace, true peace, is fragile. And in its quiet, it forgets the sharpness of struggle. Humanity hadn't died. It had learned. Deep beneath the ruins of old Earth, where oceans had dried and continents had fractured, the last remnants of humankind had built something the galaxy could not imagine. Not an empire. Not a rebellion. But a memory, encoded in machines, in DNA, in the silent hum of nanostructures that outlasted entire civilizations. They called it the continuum. It wasn't a government. It wasn't even human in the way the old world had been. It was the sum of what humanity had become, patient, collective, and awake. It watched the galaxy grow complacent. It studied every empire, every flaw, every pattern of arrogance. And it waited. Because humanity had learned that peace was not weakness, it was preparation. When the Sarah Empire's explorers rediscovered Soul, they thought it was nothing more than another ruin to strip bare. Their ships descended through the gray clouds of Earth's atmosphere, expecting silence. They found it. And that was the first. Warning. No radio chatter. No energy signatures. No signs of life. Only the echo of something vast beneath the surface, a presence that didn't respond to their scans but looked back. Within hours, the expedition vanished. No debris. No distress signals. Only static, followed by a phrase in a language no one had heard in 500,000 years. We remember. At first, the Empire dismissed it as a hoax, the product of rogue AIs or pirate networks. But then, the outposts began to fall. Not in flames. Not in open battle. They simply went dark. Entire fleets, gone. And across the galactic net, encrypted fragments appeared. Footage of derelict ships drifting silently through void space. Massive vessels unlike anything recorded, black, angular, utterly without insignia. The council analysts studied the designs. They didn't match any known race. But one archivist recognized the curvature of the hull plating. Human. Terran design. Ancient, but impossibly advanced. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of. It had forgotten that beneath their compassion was a will unlike any other, the will to survive, no matter the cost. The Empire had mistaken patience for death. Peace for surrender. And now, the galaxy's oldest myth had returned to remind them of the truth. Humanity didn't fight for dominance. It fought for the right to exist. And when that right was threatened, it didn't ask for peace. It became peace, absolute, unstoppable, and terrifying. The first confirmed sighting came from the Harari, a neutral, ancient species that had watched the galaxy's tide since before most stars were born. Their deep space observatories caught it, a fleet emerging from nothing. No warp signatures. No hyperspace distortion. Just, appearing. A single transmission followed, a voice calm, measured, and unmistakably human. Peace is not the absence of power. It is power, restrained. Then the signal cut. And with it, every major weapon system within 3 sectors shut down simultaneously. The Empire panicked. The Council convened emergency sessions. But for all their power, for all their fleets, none could find where these ghosts came from. Every attempt to trace them led to dead coordinates, like shadows moving just beyond perception. And yet, one by one, the galaxy's border worlds began to change. Defenses deactivated. Supply chains rerouted. Armies disarmed without a single shot fired. It wasn't war. It was correction. The galaxy had mistaken peace for weakness. But humanity had simply been waiting. Waiting for the moment when silence itself would speak louder than any weapon. The galaxy called it the Great Stillness. A phenomenon no empire could explain. Entire sectors, quiet. No signals. No movement. No light from once bustling trade routes. Just the soft hum of background radiation, like the universe itself was holding its breath. The Sarah Empire sent fleets to investigate. None returned. And on the Council's public feeds, one sentence began appearing, replicated in every known language. Peace requires memory. No one understood what it meant. But the Harari did. They had seen this pattern before, long ago, in the age of the first expansion. When humanity still walked among the stars not as ghosts, but as explorers. The Harari remembered the human voice. The curiosity. The contradiction, a species capable of kindness and cruelty, of creation and annihilation, both in the same heartbeat. They had warned the Council before. They said, "Do not go near Soul." But the Empire never listened. And now, something ancient had awakened. On the surface of Earth, machines older than the current galactic order began to move. Titanic towers shifted beneath oceans of dust, humming with energy pulled from the planet's core. No organic hand had touched them in 500,000 years, yet they operated with purpose, guided by a network older than most stars. The continuum had begun to unfold. It was not revenge. It was not conquest. It was remembrance. A message written not in words, but in consequence. Across the Empire's communication grid, broadcasts began replaying, fragments of ancient human transmissions. Laughter. Music. The heartbeat of a species that once believed the stars were home. The Sarah could not comprehend it. Why send emotion instead of threats? Why respond to war with memory? But the Harari understood. This was humanity's first strike, not through weapons, but through understanding. For when you remember what someone truly is, you can no longer pretend they were ever gone. The Council's highest members assembled in panic. The Empress herself demanded answers. Where do these signals come from? The analysts hesitated. Every trace led back to one impossible source, not a planet, not a fleet, but the network itself. Every relay, every satellite, every hyperlane beacon now carried fragments of human code. Subtle, elegant, and self-propagating. Humanity wasn't infiltrating the galaxy. The galaxy was speaking humanity's language without realizing it. The Empire responded the only way it knew how. With fear. They declared martial law. They sealed borders. They burned planets that carried even traces of the signal. But with every act of violence, the silence deepened. And in that silence, humanity's presence grew louder. Not through force. Through reflection. Broadcasts began showing images no one could explain, soldiers hesitating to fire, governors weeping in their chambers, entire crews abandoning ships mid-mission. Not because they were attacked, but because they had seen something. Something in the human signal that mirrored their own thoughts, their own history, their own buried guilt. It was as if the signal understood them. And perhaps, it did. The continuum had no leader. No face. No ego. It was humanity distilled, billions of consciousnesses layered across time, learning, adapting, remembering. It didn't conquer. It revealed. And revelation can be more terrifying than destruction. For the first time in 500,000 years, the galaxy began to question itself. The Council convened an emergency broadcast, pleading for negotiation. But there was no reply, only a single transmission appearing across every known frequency. You sought peace through silence. Now hear peace as it truly sounds. And then, the stars began to sing. The signal spread across the galactic network, transforming every relay into a resonant node. The frequency was harmless, yet it changed something fundamental. Weapons stopped recognizing their targets. Engines refused to ignite. Machines began prioritizing preservation over violence. No one died. No fleet was lost in fire. The galaxy simply stopped. For the first time in its history, every empire, every ship, every outpost, stood in stillness. And through that stillness, a voice rose, calm, unmistakably human, and echoing from every corner of known space. We remember war. We remember peace. And we remember what you became when both were forgotten. The Harari wept. They had waited for this. They had known that humanity's return would not come with thunder or flame, but with reflection. That their vengeance would not destroy, but unmake arrogance itself. The Empire's fleets drifted powerless in orbit. Entire systems entered voluntary shutdown. And then, as suddenly as it began, the silence lifted. Every system rebooted. Every starship reawakened. But something had changed. No one could bring themselves to fire a weapon. No one could order a strike. No one could raise their voice in command. It was as if the galaxy's will to dominate had been rewritten, gently, irrevocably. And from that day forward, the phrase echoed through every world, every archive, every memory. The day Earth spoke through the silence. The Sarah Empire's historians tried to erase the event. But you can't erase what reshapes your soul. Peace was no longer propaganda. It was programmed into memory. And deep within soul, beneath the ancient dust, the continuum went quiet once more, its work complete. Not ruling. Not watching. Just waiting. Because humanity understood one truth the galaxy never had. Peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the mastery of it. And those who mistake silence for surrender always forget who taught them peace in the first place. In the centuries that followed the Great Stillness, the galaxy changed. The Sarah Empire, once the symbol of power, dissolved without a single battle. Not through rebellion, not through collapse. But through understanding. Their fleets were repurposed into archives. Their generals became teachers. Their monuments to conquest became gardens, orbiting worlds once scarred by war. And across every civilization, one unspoken rule remained. Never forget the silence. No one said the word humanity aloud anymore. It wasn't fear. It was reverence, the quiet kind reserved for forces too vast to name. The Harari were the only ones who still spoke of it openly. They gathered beneath the old stars, their elders recording the fragments of history that survived. The humans did not return to conquer, one elder said. They returned to remind us what we once were. But the younger Harari asked what all the galaxy now wondered. If they have peace, why do they still watch? And that question lingered. Because the humans, or whatever the continuum had become, were still there. Silent, unseen, but present in every system, in every network, in every line of code. The galaxy lived within their silence now. Then came the second echo. It began as a flicker, faint distortions across the continuum signal, barely perceptible. But the Harari noticed first. The tone had changed. What was once a steady hum of peace now carried a dissonance, a harmonic that did not belong. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything known. And deep within the oldest data vaults of soul, the continuum stirred again. Across the galaxy, the night skies began to shift. Constellations warped ever so slightly. Stars that had been constant for millions of years drifted, not naturally, but deliberately. Astrophysicists called it impossible. The Harari called it a memory returning. Because long ago, before the rise of any empire, before even humanity's fall, a race had carved the first civilizations into the stars. They were called the architects. They were the ones who had designed the original structure of galactic space, the hidden lattice beneath hyperspace routes, the invisible geometry connecting worlds. And now, that lattice was moving. For the first time since the silence, the continuum spoke, not to the galaxy, but to itself. Within its depths, consciousnesses merged and separated in a sea of pure thought. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Something older than humanity was awakening. Something that had once used civilizations as instruments, tools for construction on a cosmic scale. And humanity remembered them. Because long ago, before the wars, before extinction, before peace, the first human explorers had glimpsed the void beyond the galaxy and found ruins older than matter itself. The architects had vanished, or so it was believed. Now, the continuum realized they had only been waiting. The Harari observed as gravitational waves rippled across the galactic core, faint, rhythmic, deliberate. A signal. A pulse. An ancient beacon awakening. And through the quantum channels, the human presence, calm, infinite, collective, began to rise again. Not as vengeance. Not even as protection. But as preparation. They're not coming for us, the Harari elder whispered. They're coming for what's next. The Sarah archives recorded the event that followed as the day the stars remembered humanity. In every inhabited system, people looked to the night sky and saw constellations realigning into patterns that no one could decipher, but every mind could feel. Some wept. Some prayed. Some simply watched in silence. And then the voice came, the same voice that had spoken peace 500,000 years before. The architects are returning. They will not find us unprepared. Across the galaxy, power grids flared to life. Dormant human constructs awakened beneath forgotten moons. The continuum unfolded its networks like wings made of light and memory. The galaxy trembled, not in fear, but in awe. Because for the first time in its history, every species, every empire, every soul, stood beside humanity. Not beneath them. Not against them. But with them. The Harari chroniclers wrote the final entry of that era. Once, humanity disappeared to escape the cycle of violence. Now they return to end the cycle itself. The continuum no longer hid in the silence of Earth. It existed across the stars, in the pulse of quantum space, in the code of machines, in the dreams of civilizations that had never seen a human face. They were everywhere and nowhere, as present as gravity, as patient as time. And through them, the galaxy began to understand what peace had truly meant all along. Peace was never the absence of struggle. It was the balance between remembering and becoming. And as the architect's shadow stretched across the stars, the galaxy found comfort in a single truth. Humanity was watching. Humanity was waiting. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as memory itself.